Hi everyone, Loftus here with another episode of Game Dev Diaries. Today's episode is all about demos and prototypes, and I want to show off a game prototype I recently published over on itch.io. To give a little bit of background, I've been working for a Unity game development course on Udemy, which is done by GameDev.tv. The course has been great in teaching me the fundamentals of Unity, and it includes a bunch of different projects to create and learn from. One of those games was an arcade-style space shoot-'em-up called Laser Defender. The course gives a basic outline for each game and essentially teaches the building blocks for you to go and finish off the game if you choose to. In itself, the course doesn't really provide you with any finished games. It's very much dependent on the individual to take the reins for the last few steps. With Laser Defender, I spent quite a bit of time once I was done with the course material, building levels and creating additional game features. Although graphically it would be the same as the majority who did the course, I'd like to think that I made enough gameplay changes and additions to allow it to stand on its own. The section that followed this was working on a game called Glitch Garden, which was to be a tower defense game similar in design to games such as Plants vs Zombies. This section was almost double the length of the Laser Defender section, and I found it to be more complex in terms of what was being implemented. On the flip side to this though, as much as it was a great learning experience, I don't think it was as easy to make games like Glitch Garden enjoyable when you compare them to an arcade shoot 'em up. It was my first attempt at creating a strategy type game, and it most certainly requires more development time and more design consideration than games you would typically have found in an arcade cabinet. I had the working elements of a game once I had finished the section, but it didn't feel like something that would be enjoyable to play. At this point I was a bit unsure what to do. I had spent just over 2 months working on the game, and even though I had learnt a lot from the process and definitely improved my skills, it felt like a waste to shut off the project and move on. The issue was that I didn't really feel invested in the design of the project, and I had that temptation that every developer has, where all these different new projects and ideas were constantly filling my head and vying for my attention in place of Glitch Garden. When considering my options, I felt I had two polarised possibilities. On one hand, I should push through and continue development on the project, make a proper game out of it that can show off my hard work and would be fun to play. On the other hand, I felt like putting it to one side, drawing a line under it and moving on to the next project. It was something I went back and forth on for a few days until I realised that there weren't only two options available. When reading articles or seeing comments from others, I often hear game developers praising the use of prototypes. A small sample of the game that is enough to be playable and demonstrate the game's design, while also knowingly not being a complete polished experience. I felt that this might be the perfect opportunity to try out the prototype approach. I had a game design that I didn't want to spend lots of time polishing and extended upon, while I also had the core structure there which would have otherwise been wasted. I think it's vital for newer developers to finish projects, but what actually determines when a project is considered finished is up to them. I spent months working on Laser Defender after I completed the course material, and although I learnt a lot through the process, there's definitely a point of diminishing returns when the time you spend on some of the last steps outweigh the benefit they provide from a learning point of view. Once the publication process is clear in your mind and you've done it once or twice, I think that from a learning perspective the biggest benefits come from tackling different projects and having fast turnarounds. Completing projects then doesn't have to mean setting up a ton of levels and adding a dozen new gameplay features. It can just be tuning the core gameplay until it's enjoyable and providing a couple of levels for players to experience and progress through. With Glitch Garden, I decided to release what I considered a prototype for the first game. There was still some work that needed doing to achieve this after finishing the course material for the game, but the key was to avoid anything that risked getting me bogged down or grinding progress to a halt. I had lost a bit of my drive while deciding what to do at the end of the Glitch Garden project, and just the thought that it didn't require loads of extra work and features actually motivated me to get it to a playable state. I created 8 tasks for myself to complete, and ended up completing 5 of these, while 3 I left out as I felt the time and effort involved wouldn't be worth it in this situation. The tasks I ended up completing included designing and creating levels, adding sound effects, and some core design tuning to make the game feel better to play. Originally, the game design was very fast, and I felt like this was directly opposed to why Plants vs Zombies works so well. The use of zombies in that game allows for enemies to be very slow, which give the players more time to react to situations and plan their defences accordingly. Here, with a similar setup, I had enemies running onto the screen, and it felt more like luck than judgment. I reduced the speed of the enemies while making them able to absorb more damage from the player's defenders. This made it feel more strategic compared to before. Each defender that can be placed by the player costs a certain number of stars, which are the currency within the game. So I tried to balance each level using the amount of stars available to the player. There are 5 lanes for the player to defend, so this was another area that I could tweak through the different levels, allowing enemies to only spawn in certain lanes earlier in the game. Although it was just a prototype, I still felt that I could provide a good sense of progression for the player throughout the game, increasing difficulty and introducing new elements such as different defender types for the player to use. If I was extending this to a full game release, I would definitely have added some more defenders and attackers, creating a pause menu, and I think more importantly, designing a tutorial to explain to the player how to play the game. Currently these instructions are just available in text form on the itch.io page where the game is published. I guess the biggest takeaway I can provide here is how positive the decision to create a prototype actually was for me. It ticked every box. It gave me an avenue to publish a version of a game I had spent time and effort on, allowing me to share my hard work with others. It only took a week of development time to turn the work done as part of the course into a fully playable prototype, in contrast to months I could have spent. It's allowed me to move on to a new project and start something fresh, which already has provided me with a ton of new learnings and the excitement to develop again. Finally, and I think most importantly, is the idea that creating prototypes allows for an inexpensive way to see what works. I see many people with the best intentions put months and months into a game, only to get to a point where there is a realisation that the concept doesn't work for the game, or isn't fun to play. After creating a prototype of Glitch Garden, I've seen all the benefits and have had a chance to get a sample of the game out there into the world for people to play, without investing too much time. I've learnt that quick delivery and trying out different game ideas is vital, especially when just starting out. Having the opportunity for players to try more of your games and therefore being told by players what they want or don't want, rather than you attempting to tell them, is fantastic. I'm going to try to continue with the idea of creating prototypes and demos and looking at getting a minimal viable product out there whenever I work on a game. If you're just starting out in game development too, I hope this advice can be helpful and it can prevent someone from overly investing in an idea and burning themselves out on something that doesn't work. Get the idea down, create the core gameplay loop, and then share it with the world. That's all for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode of Game Dev Diaries.